These three words didn't just inspire me, they rewired how I think about wealth. And the shift wasn't slow. The moment I understood them, I started thinking, moving, and earning differently. You've probably heard advice before, maybe even tried a few systems. But if you are still stuck, this is why. Before I could unlock the power of those three words, I had to face the mental trap that was quietly holding me back. Let's find out what it really was. The mental trap that keeps you broke. You're not lazy, you're not stupid, you're not even doing everything wrong, but somehow, no matter how hard you try, you're still stuck. You wake up every day with this quiet frustration building in your chest, that voice in the back of your mind asking, why am I still here? You've worked, you've sacrificed, you've followed the rules, and yet wealth still feels like a distant island, something you can see, but never seem to reach. You look around and wonder, what am I missing? Because deep down, you know it isn't for lack of effort. You're not sitting around waiting for life to happen. You're showing up, you're grinding, you're trying. So why does it feel like you're running on a treadmill that never moves forward? Let me tell you why. And it's not something most people are willing to say out loud. It's not your work ethic that's broken, it's your programming. You've been conditioned since childhood to think in limitations, to chase comfort instead of challenge, to obey instead of create. You were taught how to stay afloat, not how to rise. And now that you're older, you don't even notice how often those limitations leak into your thoughts, your choices, your voice. Think about the words you say when money comes up. I can't afford that. Money's tight right now. It's just not in the budget. Or the subtle ones. That's too risky. I'm not cut out for that. People like me don't get rich. You think they're just expressions, but they're not. They're code. And your brain is listening. Every time you speak like that, every time you surrender to that old script, you reinforce the lie. You tell your mind that wealth is for someone else. You teach yourself to settle. And over time, those words become your reality, not because they're true, but because you believe them. That's the trap. It's not that you aren't capable. It's not that you don't have potential. It's that your mental software is outdated. And every day you wake up and run that same broken program, the one that makes you doubt, the one that keeps you chasing crumbs while ignoring the feast. You think you're making progress because you're busy, but busyness isn't growth. It's motion without direction. It's noise without signal. And it's the perfect disguise for stagnation. And here's what really hurts. The world doesn't care how hard you try. It only responds to what you create, to what you offer, to the value you bring. And if your mind is wired to survive, not to build, not to lead, not to multiply, then you'll keep surviving, but you'll never rise. And here's the punch to the gut. You can't fix this with another hustle. You can't outwork broken programming. You have to reprogram it. The scary part? Most people never do. They spend their whole lives reacting, blaming the system, blaming the economy, blaming other people. They think their circumstances are permanent. They think their story is set. But what they don't realize is they're the ones holding the pen, and that was me. For years, I blamed the outside world, the job, the clients, the timing. But the moment I realized the real enemy was inside my own head, I couldn't unsee it. I was the one reinforcing the limits. I was the one repeating the script. I was the one keeping myself broken, not financially, but mentally. And that realization, it changed everything. Because once you understand that your thoughts are not facts and your language is not neutral, you get your power back. You stop trying to fix the symptoms and start rewriting the code. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what if I've just been thinking wrong all this time? That question is what opened the door. Because right after I confronted that mental trap, I stumbled across something that hit me like a lightning bolt. 3 words, just 3. But they didn't just sound good. They didn't just inspire me. They rewired me. They tore down the old identity I was clinging to. They gave me something solid to stand on. And most importantly, they gave me a new foundation to build wealth from inside out. But I didn't understand their full power at first, not until I saw what happened when I started living by them. The 3 words that rewired my brain. You didn't hear these words in a classroom. You didn't read them on some motivational poster, and you probably won't find them in most self-help books either, because they're not the kind of words that shout at you. They don't sound flashy. They don't feel magical. At first, they seem simple, maybe even forgettable. But when they land, really land, they don't just inspire you. They reprogram you. For me, the moment was quiet. No music, no hype, just one of those moments where you're sick of your own excuses, sick of spinning in circles, sick of waiting for things to change. I was staring at my bank balance, wondering how I could be working so hard and still feel so broken, not just in my wallet, but in my spirit. I was exhausted, frustrated, and then I heard them. 3 words that felt like they didn't belong in the world I was living in. I create value. That was it. 3 words, no fluff, no drama, just a simple statement that somehow felt heavier than anything I'd heard before. I create value. At first, I didn't even fully understand what they meant, but something inside me locked onto them like they were a lifeline. because I knew instinctively they were true. And more importantly, I knew they had never been true for me until that moment. Let me break it down for you, because when you understand the weight behind each of these words, you'll start to see why they changed everything for me and why they're about to change everything for you too. I, not they, not someone else, not someday, just I. That one letter is where ownership begins. It's where the excuses stop. It's the moment you stop blaming the algorithm, the boss, the market, the government, the clients, the timing. You stop waiting for a break and start becoming the break. You stop pointing outward and start pointing inward. And yeah, that's uncomfortable, because when you say I, you're holding up the mirror. But ownership is the foundation of freedom. And there's no real wealth without freedom. Then comes the second word, create. Not wait, not hope, not react, create. This is where everything starts to shift, because the world is filled with people who consume, but very few who create. And creation requires courage. It requires risk. It requires you to show up before you feel ready. Creating something, whether it's a product, a business, a solution, an idea, it forces you to leave safety behind. It makes you confront the part of yourself that's been hiding, and it teaches you that motion without intention is just noise. When you start creating, you stop chasing, you start shaping, you start owning your direction instead of drifting through someone else's. And then the final word, value. This is the word most people overlook, but it's the most important one, because money doesn't follow effort. It doesn't follow passion. It follows value. Value is what the market rewards. Value is what people pay for. Value is what builds wealth. And when you say, I create value, you're making a decision to become someone who solves problems instead of avoiding them, someone who contributes instead of complains, someone who asks, what can I give instead of what can I get? That mindset is rare, but it's magnetic, because once you understand that money is simply a reflection of the value you produce, you stop begging for raises and start building streams. You stop asking permission and start creating momentum. You stop being a consumer of other people's dreams and become the architect of your own. I create value, 3 words, but together they form an identity, an operating system, a lens for every choice you make from now on. And here's the real shift. When those words become your inner dialogue, everything around you starts to realign. Your habits change. Your confidence grows. Your energy sharpens, because you're no longer living from survival, you're living from service. You're no longer obsessing over money, you're focused on meaning. And that's when wealth becomes a byproduct, not a pursuit. These 3 words reprogrammed me from the inside out, not because they were fancy, but because they were true. They cut through every excuse I had. They gave me clarity when I was lost. They gave me direction when I was drifting, and they handed the pen back to me so I could write a different story. But don't be mistaken, just knowing the words isn't enough. It's easy to say them, harder to live them, and that's where most people break down. How those words changed my behavior. It's one thing to say the words, it's another thing entirely to live them. When I first started repeating, I create value, I'll be honest, it felt like a mindset hack. Something to get me through tough days, a temporary mental boost. I didn't fully grasp the depth of what I was doing. I just knew I was tired of feeling stuck. I was tired of chasing without catching. So I said the words, not because I believed them at first, but because I needed to believe in something. And what happened next, it didn't feel like a breakthrough. It felt like a slow burn, like something inside me was turning quietly, permanently. Those 3 words didn't change me overnight. They changed how I started showing up in small, almost invisible ways. But the thing about small shifts is when they're rooted in identity, they compound. That's what I didn't understand back then. Identity drives behavior, and behavior creates results. So when I began believing that I was someone who creates value, my actions started aligning with that belief without me even trying. I stopped reacting to everything. I stopped chasing every little task that made me feel busy. I started asking myself every morning, what can I do today that actually creates value? Not what looks good, not what feels productive, but what actually moves something forward, whether it's for my business, my relationships, or my own growth. And here's what surprised me. I started doing less, but accomplishing more. Because when you move from that internal place of value creation, you stop wasting energy on things that don't matter. You stop posting just to post. You stop emailing just to stay visible. You stop filling your calendar with fluff just to feel like you're making progress. Instead, you start focusing, sharpening, building. You get honest about what's real and what's noise. Even how I communicated began to shift. I used to walk into conversations thinking, what do I need from this person? But now I walk in thinking, what can I give? That one shift changed everything, because people can feel it. When you speak from a place of need, it's repelling. But when you speak from a place of value, it's magnetic. People want to be around creators, builders, solvers, not just talkers. I also started paying attention to how I invested my time. I stopped saying yes to everything, because Because when you believe you create value, your time starts to matter. You start protecting it, guarding it. You realize that not every opportunity is worth your energy. Not every request deserves your response. You stop measuring your day by how much you got done and start measuring it by how much impact you created. It wasn't just mindset. It was muscle memory. It was how I opened my laptop, how I showed up in a meeting, how I responded to setbacks. I wasn't operating like someone who was trying to succeed anymore. I was operating like someone who expected to, because I had finally accepted that I wasn't chasing wealth. I was building it by creating value in every room I entered. And let me tell you, that's where confidence comes from. Not from reading quotes, not from pretending you have it all figured out, but from seeing yourself act in alignment with your new identity. That's what gives you certainty. That's what builds real momentum. Because here's the truth, most people don't need more discipline. They need a better identity. You can force yourself to hustle for a few weeks. You can grind through your to-do list for a while. But if deep down, you still see yourself as someone who's behind, broke, unlucky, or unworthy, you'll find a way to sabotage it all. You'll subconsciously pull yourself back to your default settings. You'll get in your own way every single time. But when your default setting becomes, I create value, the game changes. You walk differently, you think differently, you speak with intention, you write with purpose. You stop asking what the world owes you and start asking what you can bring to it. And the crazy thing is, the world notices. People begin to respond to the new version of you, not because you're louder, not because you're faking confidence, but because they can feel your shift. They can see that you're grounded, that you found a frequency most people never reach, a frequency of ownership, of impact, of clarity. This is when money starts to come, not because you're chasing it, but because you become someone who draws it in. Opportunities open up, people refer you, clients trust you, not because you asked, but because you're creating real value, and that kind of energy is hard to ignore. But here's the part most people never prepare for. The internal resistance doesn't disappear. The old programming doesn't just vanish because you've adopted new words. It hides, it waits. And the moment you're tired or stressed or uncertain, it tries to pull you back into comfort, back into consumption, back into waiting. That's why this next step is everything, because even though the words had changed me, I knew I had to protect them, reinforce them, cement them into my daily life. Otherwise, they'd fade and I'd drift right back to the person I fought so hard to outgrow. How I reinforced the programming. It's one thing to have a breakthrough. It's another thing to build on it. Most people never do. They hear something powerful. They feel the shift. And for a moment, they believe they've changed, but belief without reinforcement fades quickly, because the world doesn't care that you had an epiphany. It doesn't care that you almost changed. It only responds to what you do next, consistently. That's why I had to take, I create value from something I said to something I lived every single day, without excuses, without negotiation, without waiting for motivation to show up first. If you want to truly reprogram your brain for wealth, you need a system, something that turns your new identity into daily action, something that doesn't leave room for the old programming to sneak back in when life gets loud again. Here's how I did it. Step one, I made the words unavoidable. I wrote them on my mirror. I put them on my phone lock screen. I set a calendar alert every morning at 6 a.m. 3 words, I create value. Before email, before news, before anyone else's noise. Those words had to be the first thing my brain consumed, because if you don't feed your identity on purpose, the world will feed it by accident. And the world, it will always try to shrink you. It will always whisper doubt. It will always reward distraction over depth. That's why this reinforcement has to be deliberate. Step two, I turned it into a question. Every morning, before I touched my to-do list, I asked, what can I do today that creates real value? Not what looks good, not what checks a box, not what makes me feel busy. What creates value? That one question eliminated half my distractions. It exposed my fake productivity. It forced me to focus not just on effort, but on impact. And the more I asked it, the sharper I got. The more intentional my actions became, the more confident I felt about the way I was showing up. I started moving with purpose, because I wasn't just doing things, I was designing outcomes. Step three, I kept a scorecard. Every night, I wrote down one thing. What did I create today that someone else would call valuable? Some days, it was a client win. Some days, it was solving a hard problem. And some days, it was just being present with someone who needed me. But every time I answered that question, I reinforced the identity. And every time I couldn't answer it, that was feedback too. Not shame, not failure. Just a reminder that the old habits are always one lazy decision away from taking back control. And that's the thing most people don't get. Reinforcing a new identity isn't about being perfect. It's about being aware. It's about noticing when you're drifting, catching it, and correcting it before the drift becomes your new default. Now here's the final piece, language discipline. This part hit me hard because once I started rewiring my thinking, I noticed how casually I used to speak in limits. I'd say things like, I can't afford that, I don't know how, must be nice, I'm not ready. little phrases thrown out like they meant nothing, but those phrases were mini programs reinstalling the broke version of me with every breath, so I cut them ruthlessly. I started policing my own speech. If I caught myself saying anything rooted in limitation, I stopped mid-sentence. I replaced it immediately with something rooted in power. Not fake confidence, not cheesy affirmations, just neutral, intentional truth. Instead of "I can't afford that," I'd say "I'm choosing to allocate my money elsewhere." Instead of "I don't know how," I'd say "I'll figure it out." Instead of "That's not for people like me," it'd say "I'm becoming the kind of person who earns that." Language isn't just communication, it's conditioning. Your brain believes what you repeatedly say, and I refuse to let my brain believe in limitation ever again. Reinforcing the programming wasn't sexy. It wasn't viral. It wasn't loud. But it was everything. Because it turned a moment of clarity into a new identity. And that identity began to shape every corner of my life. But the most powerful shift hadn't even arrived yet. Because while I was changing on the inside, the world around me was about to reflect that change in a way I couldn't ignore, and slowly the world started reacting to the new me, the wealth results it created. At first, nothing looked different. The world didn't suddenly shower me with opportunities. There were no instant wins, no unexpected checks in the mail. But inside, everything was different. I could feel it. I was walking through my days with a new frequency, one that was calm, clear, intentional. And the craziest part? People noticed. Clients started replying faster. Conversations became more direct. Offers felt easier to close. Not because I changed my logo, not because I had some viral moment, but because I had changed how I thought, how I moved, how I spoke. I stopped showing up like someone hoping for permission. I started showing up like someone who expected results, not from others, but from myself. Wealth didn't show up as a jackpot. It showed up in patterns, in momentum, in the consistency of small wins stacking on top of each other. I began solving problems faster, making decisions quicker, attracting opportunities that used to feel out of reach. People trusted me more not because I was louder, but because I was anchored. I had direction. I had proof that I wasn't just talking, I was delivering. And then the money followed, not all at once, but enough to feel the shift. My income stopped feeling fragile. My schedule stopped feeling reactive. I wasn't chasing anymore, I was creating. And when you create, you stop waiting for someone else to validate your worth. You know where it comes from. You built it with your own hands, with your own thoughts, with your own consistency. That's what most people don't understand. Wealth isn't an event, it's a response. It responds to your behavior, it responds to your decisions. And those decisions come from how you see yourself. If you see yourself as someone who's barely getting by, your decisions will match that identity. You'll play it safe, you'll talk yourself out of growth, you'll settle for scraps. But when you truly believe I create value, your world bends around that belief. You stop negotiating with fear. You stop dancing around your potential. You show up like someone who belongs in the room. And that's exactly how the room starts to treat you. People began referring me without me asking. Collaborations came naturally. I started getting invited into spaces I used to knock on for years with no reply. Why? Because people feel certainty. They gravitate toward value. And when you're rooted in the identity of someone who creates value, it shows. You don't have to convince. You don't have to beg. You just have to be who you already are. That's the real shift. That's when you stop fighting to make money and start attracting it by becoming the kind of person it can't ignore. But here's the part nobody tells you. Wealth isn't just financial. It's emotional, it's mental, it's spiritual. Real wealth is waking up in the morning without anxiety running your life. It's making decisions from a place of clarity instead of desperation. It's walking into any room, any situation, knowing you bring something that matters. You don't just want dollars. You want agency. You want freedom. You want to feel like you're building something that actually means something. That's what I Create Value gives you. It's not just a pathway to wealth. It's a path to peace. Because once you understand where wealth actually comes from, you stop fearing its absence. You stop obsessing over when it will arrive. You know how to make it. You know how to attract it. You know how to keep it. And maybe the biggest shift of all, you stop comparing. You stop measuring your life against someone else's timeline. Because you know deep in your bones that you've tapped into something real. You're not just consuming someone else's success. You're building your own, quietly, powerfully, one valuable step at a time. The person you were before those 3 words, that version of you was guessing, reacting, hoping, but the version of you that lives by I create value, that version isn't waiting, that version builds, that version moves like Someone who already belongs where others are still trying to fit in. And when the world feels that version of you, it responds every time. But it didn't end there, because as powerful as the results were, something even deeper was happening. The shift was no longer just about success, it became about who I was becoming. Identity shift from scarcity to creator. This was never about 3 words. It was never about some magical affirmation you whispered to yourself in the mirror. This was about transformation. This was about identity. Because until you change the story you live by, your life will keep repeating itself. The biggest lie you've been told is that success is external, that wealth is a number, a status, a thing to chase. But the truth is, it's always been internal. It's always been about the kind of person you believe you are. And that belief shows up in everything: how you speak, how you walk, how you work, how you think when no one's watching. When I started living by I create value, I didn't just get richer, I got clearer. I started making sharper decisions, saying no to things that didn't serve me, standing taller in rooms I used to shrink in, not because I suddenly had all the answers, but because I finally understood who I was. I wasn't here to survive. I wasn't here to impress. I was here to build. That changes how you show up. It changes what you tolerate. It changes how you react to setbacks, distractions, and doubt. Because a creator doesn't panic when things go wrong. A creator doesn't fold when results take longer than expected. A creator leans in, refines, adapts, and keeps moving forward. Most people don't fail because they're not capable. They fail because they're still living in the identity of someone who's trying to make it. And as long as you stay there, clawing, hoping, proving, you'll keep pushing wealth away. But when you decide to fully embody the identity of someone who creates value, you stop trying to make it. You realize you already are it, and the world starts to mirror that back to you. Let me say this clearly. Wealth does not come to the loudest voice. It comes to the clearest signal. It comes to the person who operates every single day with the belief that they create value, no matter what's in their bank account right now. Because wealth doesn't follow your feelings. It follows your focus, and your focus will always follow your identity. The moment I stopped seeing myself as a struggler and started living as a creator, everything changed. I walked into the same rooms, but got different outcomes. I had the same hours in my day, but used them completely differently. I didn't need more time. I didn't need more luck. I needed alignment. And once I had that, I didn't have to chase anymore. Opportunities found me because value creates pull, and people are drawn to those who know what they bring. So here's what I want you to take with you. You don't need to wait for your circumstances to change. You don't need to wait for permission. You don't need to wait for motivation. You just need to decide who you are. Say it with me. I create value. Say it until it becomes your instinct. Say it until it shows up in how you walk, how you talk, how you choose. Say it until you don't just believe it, you become it. Because once you believe it at your core, the world will start to believe it too. And that's when everything shifts. You don't need to force success. You just need to become someone it naturally flows to. And that's the truth most people never hear. They chase the outcome. You live the identity, and that's why you win. I create value. That's the code. That's the switch. That's the difference between living in scarcity and stepping fully into your wealth. Say it again. I create value. And now the world will respond accordingly.